Welcome to this course on climate, economics, and health policy. In this first module, we'll explore how climate change intersects with the economy, how rising temperatures, changing rainfall, extreme events, and environmental stresses reshape production, consumption, and distribution of resources. We will also examine how economic theories and policies can help societies adapt to and mitigate the consequences of climate change. Section 1. Understanding climate change as an economic problem. Climate change is not just a scientific or environmental issue. It is fundamentally an economic problem because it affects the way resources are used, the cost of production, and the distribution of welfare. When floods destroy infrastructure, or droughts reduce agricultural yield, these events translate into economic losses. Similarly, when governments spend billions on disaster response, healthcare, or rebuilding, they are making economic choices about resource allocation. Economists view climate change as a case of market failure, where the cost of greenhouse gas emissions are not borne by the polluters but by society at large. This is often described as the problem of externalities. Section 2. The economic impacts of climate change. The economic impacts of climate change are both direct and indirect. Agriculture and food security, heat waves, unpredictable rainfall, and soil degradation lower crop yields. This threatens livelihoods, raises food prices, and increases the risk of hunger, especially in developing countries. Infrastructure damage, rising sea levels and storms destroy roads, bridges, and homes, requiring massive rebuilding efforts. Energy demand, hotter climates increase the need for cooling, straining energy systems. Labor productivity, extreme heat reduces outdoor work capacity, particularly in agriculture and construction. Insurance and finance, natural disasters increase insurance claims, destabilize financial markets, and discourage investment in vulnerable areas. Over time, these impacts can slow economic growth, deepen poverty, and increase inequality between regions and nations. Section 3. Climate change and inequality. Climate change does not affect all people equally. Poorer countries and marginalized groups are often the most vulnerable because they have fewer resources to adapt. For example, small island nations face existential threats from rising seas. Farmers in sub-Saharan Africa struggle with water scarcity. Low-income urban populations live in areas most at risk of flooding. Economics therefore plays a role in understanding climate justice, how the burdens and benefits of climate action should be fairly shared. Section 4. The economics of adaptation and mitigation. When faced with climate change, societies have two broad strategies: adaptation and mitigation. Adaptation means adjusting to climate impacts, for example, building flood defenses, adopting drought-resistant crops, or improving health care to handle heat-related diseases. Mitigation means reducing the causes of climate change, for example, cutting greenhouse gas emissions, switching to renewable energy, or improving energy efficiency. Economists use cost-benefit analysis to determine which investments make sense. For instance, it may be more cost-effective to invest in renewable energy now than to pay for disaster recovery later. Section 5. Policy tools in climate economics. Governments and institutions use various tools to address climate change. These include carbon pricing. Putting a price on carbon emissions through taxes or tradable permits encourages businesses to cut emissions. Subsidies for clean technology, supporting renewable energy, electric vehicles, or efficient appliances. Regulations, setting limits on emissions, fuel efficiency standards, or building codes. Investment in research and development, driving innovation in green technologies. Each tool has trade-offs in terms of effectiveness, political acceptability, and fairness. Section 6. International economic dimensions. Climate change is a global problem, and no single country can solve it alone. This makes international cooperation essential. Agreements like the Paris Agreement set global targets for emissions reductions. Mechanisms such as climate finance transfer resources from wealthy nations to poorer nations to help them adapt and mitigate. Global markets are shifting as countries compete in the race for renewable technologies, green jobs, and sustainable industries. The challenge is to design economic systems that encourage cooperation rather than competition over limited resources. In this module, we discuss climate change as an economic issue, examine its impacts on agriculture, infrastructure, labor, and finance, and explored how adaptation and mitigation strategies can be supported through policy tools. We also highlighted the inequalities that climate change creates and the role of international cooperation in addressing them.